Wedge Issues is brought to you by wispolitics.com, a place where political insiders go for news, opinion, and campaign information. Once again, that's wispolitics.com.
Democrats are coming to the land of cheese, beer, and sausage for their 2020 national convention. And they're going to find out that Milwaukee and the whole state of Wisconsin have a whole lot more than that to offer. I'm Jessie Opoyan, and this is Wedge Issues, a Cap Times podcast about state government and politics in Wisconsin. For those of you who, in addition to listening to this podcast, are Cap Times readers, you may have been expecting this episode to be an interview with Ben Wickler, who is running for the state Democratic Party of Wisconsin chair position. But we had a little bit of breaking news this week when we found out that Milwaukee would be the host city for the 2020 Democratic National Convention. So this week we have a special episode featuring my friends from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Molly Beck and Patrick Marley. We'll talk a little bit about what went into Milwaukee landing the gig, why Republicans were quick to criticize the city's socialist history, and of course we will offer a few recommendations of beers and cheeses for visitors to try when they're here. I am super excited to have my friends and competitors and Capital Press Corps colleagues Molly Beck and Patrick Marley from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel here today. And they are here because we found out that Milwaukee is going to be the host site of the Democratic National Convention in 2020. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we're going to be a little busy these next few years, months.
Job security, yeah.
That's what every Wisconsin political journalist is saying, job security.
Yeah, this is big for every political reporter in Wisconsin, but you guys obviously kind of have the direct connection to this because it's the hometown paper, even though you both work in Madison. Okay, so tell me, you guys had reporters covering the day that everyone found out that this was going to happen. You guys were doing it from Madison, but what kind of stuff have we been hearing from Milwaukee officials about what this means for the city and for Wisconsin?
I think Milwaukee's very excited for this. The economic impact alone, I think they're estimating up to $200 million just for having the convention and the events and everybody in Milwaukee for those few days in July of 2020. So that alone is a big deal for Milwaukee. I think it also Democrats are state Democrats are excited that the national Democratic scene is paying attention to Wisconsin right now.
It really burns a lot of Wisconsin Democrats that they lost the presidential election in Wisconsin after a 30-plus year winning streak. And so I think this builds on the momentum that they've got to try to take the state back.
Yeah, we even heard Mark Pocan, big Dem booster in Wisconsin, kind of one of the big voices of the party, taking a jab at Hillary Clinton the other day. He said the exciting thing about this is it means that the Democratic nominee really has to visit the state this time because she didn't do that after the primary in 2016.
Well, we already have had Amy Klobuchar and Beto O'Rourke here. So I think that even if we didn't get the convention, they all know they would have to come to the state early and often.
Everyone kind of learned that lesson. So the two cities that Milwaukee beat out, there were a lot of cities that applied, but in the end it came down to Houston and Miami and Milwaukee. And it seemed like in particular, Miami was pretty salty about this.
They kind of seemed like sore losers, maybe. I saw somebody, a top official in the Democratic Party there saying that Democrats wouldn't be getting a red carpet by picking Milwaukee. I'm pretty sure there's probably a red carpet in Milwaukee somewhere.
You could probably find one.
I bet so.
Yeah, maybe at the Pfister, or maybe they'll just get one for the
Burgundy at least.
Burgundy at least, yeah.
It's not like Florida's going to get ignored either in this next
election.
Right.
These are, we know what the battleground states are going to be. And it should be noted that it's not a guarantee that when you have the convention in a state that party wins the state. In fact, often that hasn't been the case in recent years. But like you mentioned, Patrick, 2016 was the first time since 1984 that a Republican had won in Wisconsin in a presidential election. So, I would recommend, I think, Craig Gilbert had a good story for you guys talking about just sort of the geographic significance of this, looking at the suburb dynamic outside Milwaukee. You've got deep blue city surrounded by bright red suburbs and kind of just a sea of blue over by Madison that's rapidly growing and expanding into the suburbs, and then the rest of the state that's just a big question mark at this point.
Yeah, though, I mean, it does seem like it's ripe Trump country. I mean, it went for Trump in 2016, and although Walker lost, that was a strong point for him were those rural parts of the state. So I think we very likely could continue to see that.
Yeah, state Republicans are... I saw, I believe, the new executive director tweeting something about they hope for this to be a three-peat of Republicans winning the state that the Democratic convention's in.
Yeah, that's been the case the last two. So the Republican reaction to this has been sort of like the obvious, this is good economic impact on the state, but we really quickly then started hearing Republicans criticizing Democrats for, they're saying this is going to put their extreme policies on display.
Socialism.
Socialism.
Yeah.
Socialism
was
happened
the big word
right
of the day
away.
Monday. Yes.
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 We got to socialism quickly. That's true.
We did, which is kind of how the conversation has been going more and more so with Republican criticism of the Democratic Party.
What they're, with AOC and some others in the party, there's been, Bernie Sanders being a declared Democratic socialist. That's been a lot of talk about the party, and Republicans have been very critical of it. Milwaukee has a history of having socialist mayors in the past, and so the state Republican Party tried to draw that connection. Though I would say the socialism of Milwaukee's history is pretty different than the socialism that we're talking about today.
Yeah. So the Milwaukee Socialism had a name.
It had a very sexy name. It had as sewer socialists because they were very focused on public infrastructure. So they were building sewers in the city. And so that was it was a lot about public investment there. Milwaukee, I think, had three socialist mayors. I first learned about it when Frank Zeidler died in, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. And I asked for his FBI file. Which was extensive because as a socialist during a time when the FBI was monitoring socialists and communists very closely, and what was interesting about it, and I can't remember all the details because it's been a long time since I wrote it, but there were handwritten notes on his file about comments that Frank Zeidler had made that J. Edgar Hoover had commented directly about him. So it kind of highlighted how involved J. Edgar Hoover was in all the things the FBI was doing.
That's just fascinating. But he was mayor for a really long time.
He was, yes.
And Milwaukee had three socialist mayors.
I think that's right, three of them.
Yeah, so, definitely the city's got some ties, but a few people pointed out when the first level of criticism from state Republicans was, of course Democrats would have their convention in Milwaukee. It's a socialist city. Republicans in the state had their state convention in Milwaukee just last year.
That's right.
So,
that's true.
Milwaukee kind of gets a bad rap every now and then, but at the end of the day, people still go back to it because it's the biggest city in the state and it's got the resources to have these conventions. It's one of the big economic drivers of the state.
Scott Walker lives there now.
Scott Walker lives
he
there
was
now.
The county executive for Milwaukee County. So, yeah, there's a lot of connections between Republicans and the state's largest city.
Yeah. So one of the big question marks, I think, immediately, going into the decision process of which city could handle this and then coming out of it even still, there was, I think Nate Silver had a tweet that a lot of people were unhappy with was, does the city really have the space and the needed infrastructure and the hotel rooms and the money to put something on like this? What kind of reassurances have we heard that Milwaukee's prepared to do something like this?
I think everybody's admitted that there's probably going to be a hotel room shortage, but there's also Airbnb and things like that. Otherwise, I think that's the only thing that I've heard that is an obvious concern.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's possibly what held up the final decision. We had this kind of extended period of not knowing if it was going to be Milwaukee, and I think it was because the DNC wanted assurances that there would be enough beds for everyone. As Molly notes, Chicago's not far, Madison is not far.
Right.
So I think everyone will have a place to stay. They just might have a really long commute every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people who have covered other conventions or attended other conventions are familiar with that. I know in Cleveland, the RNC in 2016, a lot of people were staying at least an hour out of the city. Yeah. So people have dealt with it before they can deal with it again. The centerpiece, sort of the draw for Milwaukee is the new arena that is now called the Fiserv Forum. For many months, it was just sort of this hypothetical new Bucks arena, which was a few years ago in the legislature when Scott Walker was still governor. The Bucks were looking at leaving Milwaukee because the arena that they were playing in was really outdated. So they needed a new arena to stay, and the state ended up chipping in for that a little bit. The Scott Walker slogan on that, Molly, we were talking about that the other day.
Cheaper to keep them.
Cheaper to keep them.
Yeah. And he pointed out the irony of that, a few days ago. He said that, that was a deal that he and other Republicans were championing, and now it's going to be probably the centerpiece of the whole convention for Democrats.
Right. It's kind of a weird, strange bedfellow sort of thing. I mean, the owners of the Bucks are big Democratic donors.
Right.
Alec Lasry, one of the senior VPs on the team, played a huge role in getting the convention here. But they also worked with the Republican legislature and a Republican governor to make this deal happen.
Right.
One of the big winners here is Fiserv, who's going to get a lot of free advertising over the next year and a half.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people are going to say, what is Fiserv? And maybe more people will find out about this.
That's right.
Company.
Well, and didn't Fiserv get some tax breaks to stay in the state, too?
They got an incentive package. Actually, it was it part of the Bucks
It was.
deal? I think it was
It
part of the
was,
Bucks deal
yeah.
that said
Yeah.
if they stayed and kept their headquarters in Wisconsin, they would get some money.
And then they got their name on the stadium, too.
Actually, is it in the Bucks or was it?
I think it was in Foxconn.
It was in
It
the
was in
Foxconn. It was in the
Foxconn, yes.
Foxconn bill.
Scratch
That's
that, Foxconn.
It was in
Yeah.
Foxconn,
Yeah.
which I'm sure we'll hear a lot about also
Yes.
during this convention.
We sure will.
I'm betting so.
All right, well, what else are we missing here?
The elephant in the room, or in this case, the donkey,
Yes.
which is
my 30th birthday is the last day of this convention.
And there is nothing you would rather do on your birthday than spend it in the middle of a political convention, right?
It just seems fitting in
It
so
does.
many ways.
It seems very appropriate.
It does. I mean, of course, I would love to celebrate my birthday in Madison, where I live, but it's kind of nice to think of, going out in Milwaukee, experiencing what the city has to
It's kind of
offer.
nice to think about working 14 hours. Isn't
Yeah,
it? After
it's a great
working
birthday
like
present.
So much
20 hours for
time
the
and
3
energy
previous days. Yeah. Sounds like a
Bring this
blast.
in.
I'll buy you a beer.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Buy you 2 beers.
I'll need a few probably at that point. I don't know. It's because last night of the convention traditionally is the night when the nominees actually being acknowledged and speaking. So nothing for me to do.
No.
Yeah, Molly very cruelly suggested that Fight Song could be playing in the arena at the moment that I turn 30.
Probably will.
I will cry.
If past his prologue.
I would hope that would be a lesson everyone could learn, is just to write that song out of the convention. So something that came up this morning, the day we're recording is Thursday, but Governor Evers was on the radio talking today about his budget and about transportation. And that's another question I think about Milwaukee and the logistics of getting around is there are a lot of construction projects that are happening there. And he's talked about a few that are going to be completed or at least kind of in the works at this time.
The big one that has tied up traffic in recent years is the Zoo interchange, and that is on sort of the main thruway is complete. The north leg, if Evers has his way, would be done in the next 2 years. So if it weren't completed, we would be close to completed at that point. But, there's also the local streets and potholes and plenty of other work that's going on there.
So just this week, we found out that Beto O'Rourke is joining the field. We already have a few other announced candidates and a lot more who are thinking about it. Do you guys want to make any predictions on what we're going to be looking at by the time people come to Milwaukee?
It could look like the Democratic primary and the governor's election here in Wisconsin, where there is many candidates and the person with the most name ID ended up winning. And I think people are kind of expecting Joe Biden to be the Tony Evers in this field.
Yeah, so we had, 8 in the Democratic primary in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin. Another good parallel is the Republican race where you had more than 15. I can't remember if it was 17 or what the number was. Scott Walker was among them for a hot minute. Tony Evers was asked about that and whether it would hurt the chances of the Democrats to have such a massive field. And he made the point that Republicans had a large, messy primary, and Trump won. And Evers had a large, not so messy, but large, confusing primary, and he ended up winning ultimately.
Wedge Issues is sponsored by wispolitics.com. You can become a wispolitics.com member. Find out more at wispolitics.com/membership.
Okay, so none of us live in Milwaukee, but we've all spent some time there.
Oh, yeah, I lived there a few years.
You did live there a few years. Molly, you've got family living there now.
Yep. Wauwatosa.
Yeah.
But yes, close
enough. And, it's not just Milwaukee that's on display. It's all of Wisconsin that's on display. So for people who are going to experience Wisconsin for the first time, and we're going to read so many, like the New York Times has done them, we're going to read so many stories about, like, here's what to expect when you come to Wisconsin. But what are some of the best and worst things you think people are going to experience when they come to this state? And particularly, what would you recommend people do when they're in Milwaukee if they have any time to do anything?
Milwaukee is a city of bars of all stripes, and they should check them out. I think there's more taverns than churches. Isn't that kind of the cliche about Milwaukee?
Yeah.
And probably all of Wisconsin.
Definitely.
When we first moved there, my wife thought, hey, what would be cool is if we tried to visit every bar in Milwaukee. And it was like,
Oh, man.
there was like one look in a phone book, and it was like, well, let's throw that idea out the window. Like, maybe we could try to hit all the bars in our neighborhood. So there's lots of fun places, both big and small. Google some, but then also just walk around and wander into your neighborhood bar.
Yeah. Cheese curds on every menu. Old fashions on happy hour.
Mm-hmm.
Brian's Cocktail Lounge is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I like that. A lot of beer. He'll have to be drinking lots of beer. There'll be beer everywhere.
Just everywhere.
Yes.
When I moved to Wisconsin, I was shocked at how many places and in how many hours of the day there was beer.
I was going to say, not just that there's beer, but like at 9 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier.
And nobody's going to look twice at you if you're drinking beer at 9 a.m. So.
Yeah. Even the contract signing for the DNC.
That's right.
There was beer.
There was beer, which the lieutenant governor spilled some on the contract.
I heard that.
And I followed up with him and asked what kind of beer they were drinking, and he didn't know.
Wow.
He didn't know?
I don't know.
He couldn't taste the champagne of beers?
That's what I was,
I bet that's what it was.
I'm guessing that was
High
what it
Life.
was.
Yeah.
High Life has got a lot going for it.
good.
If you come to Milwaukee, you need to drink High Life.
Yeah.
But you also
you also need to try other.
You need to look beyond Miller because there's a million great craft beers.
That's right. So you guys are familiar with the question I always ask the politicians who come on the show, but I think that it is fitting, since we're giving tips to visitors, that I ask your favorite Wisconsin beer.
I've been thinking about this all day.
You knew it was going to come.
I know.
I forgot to think about it.
I think my favorite is High Life because it works in most situations.
Patrick is so disappointed.
Okay, you didn't say Shandy. You didn't take me down the Shandy road, so it's okay. It's okay. I can respect the High Life.
I also like Central Waters, anything
Yeah.
they do that's in a bourbon barrel.
They do a lot of good barrel-aged
yeah.
beers.
Yes.
Yeah,
their
so
stout is
our
the best.
former governor, Republican former governor Scott Walker's favorite beer is Leinenkugel's Summer Shandy, and our current governor, Tony Evers, is a Miller Lite guy. Patrick, what's your favorite?
What about you, Patrick?
I can't choose a favorite. There's too many great beers.
You are a craft beer connoisseur.
Yes.
It's not Summer Shandy, and it's not Miller Lite, and it's not Spotted Cow, which is I think the
everybody's
most
sort of,
common choice for your guests on your show. I like your choice of the Central Waters bourbon barrel beers. I mean, what Central Waters does is pretty incredible. And
Yeah.
I'm the kind of person who, like, every time I go to the liquor store, I want to try the new beer. I want to have the thing that I haven't had. So my favorite is whatever's new.
So I mean, it's hard to choose, and I drink a fair amount of High Life also, and Schlitz. I'm a big Schlitz fan if we want to get into the classic. But if we're talking like newer craft beers, the thing I always tell people, if they have already tried Spotted Cow, because if you haven't tried it, you probably should.
Sure,
But,
absolutely.
but if you like IPAs, and if you like IPAs that aren't super bitter, my favorite's probably Carbon 4 Fantasy Factory, which is
it's
a
a great
Madison
beer.
beer, but it's a good standby.
The
Or
Ale
Hopalicious.
Asylum, Hopalicious
Yeah.
is very good.
Yes.
Yep. Good City is a new Milwaukee brewery that's got a lot going on.
Yeah.
That is going to have a very close proximity to a lot of the activity that's
And if you're drinking New Glarus, don't stop at Spotted Cow.
That's
like
true.
They
Keep
have
going.
the Scream
Yeah.
Imperial IPA, which is really good. They've got the fruit beers and sours that are great. What's that?
Patrick was just rudely interrupted by Molly's timer, which I would like to edit out.
Stop talking about beer. Marley, shut up about beer. I've heard that before.
It's true. Well, that's our cue to come close to wrapping up, but I do have to ask your favorite Wisconsin cheese also.
So mine is it's in a black package. It's Montmart. Is that how you pronounce it?
I don't know. I
You
know
know
the
what
brand
I'm
you're
talking
talking
about.
about.
Montemori, I think, right?
Yes.
It's Sartori?
Yes,
Yeah.
Sartori.
Yeah, which is
that
a
is my
Sheboygan
favorite.
area cheese. That's a really good cheese.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Let's see. The cheese that I always eat is the Cedar Grove cheddar, which is kind of a boring choice. But the Hooks 5-year cheddar, like that stuff is
yeah.
pretty incredible.
Yeah. Any Hooks cheddar you can get your hands on, I think, is a good choice.
Yes.
The 15-year they call Wisconsin Gold because
Yeah.
it's got the little crunchy crystals and it's
Yeah.
a lot harder to find.
And
but
you also need to take a bank loan out.
Yeah,
to
a little
buy
bit, yeah.
sliver of it. But it's delicious.
But it's really good. But the 5 and the 10 are much more
Yeah.
affordable and really tasty. I'm a huge fan also of Landmark Creamery's Tallgrass Reserve. That's started actually by 2 women who at least one is somewhat involved in Democratic politics. So they've got a little political connection there. Well, thank you guys for coming
Thanks for having
in
us.
to talk about
Yeah,
this. We're
thank
going to
you
have
so
a
much.
lot to keep us busy these next few months. And before I let you guys go, since you were so kind to come on my podcast and give me a little bit of promotion, you guys have a new product coming out soon. Tell me what you've got going on.
Well, in addition to listening to Wedge Issues every week,
You are, yes.
anybody who's into Wisconsin politics should subscribe to the new weekly newsletter that the Journal Sentinel is launching. If you just go to jsonline.com, you'll be able to see how to do that.
It's called On Wisconsin Politics.
Which is a great name.
It is.
Yes.
Bill
Yeah.
Glover of the Journal Sentinel. Everybody knows him and loves him. He came up with it.
Oh, that's smart. All right, everybody subscribe to On Wisconsin Politics from the Journal Sentinel and keep listening to Wedge Issues too. Thank you for listening to Wedge Issues. Our theme music is Oh Wisconsin by Loxley. We have new episodes every Friday, so make sure you're subscribed on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date. If you have feedback or suggestions for me, you can find me on Twitter at JessieOpie, or you can email me at jopoien@madison.com. You can also leave us a rating or review on iTunes. If you like what you hear on Wedge Issues, you can also check out our other Cap Times podcasts like The Corner Table, which talks about food and drink in Madison, or The Mad Splainers, which is about local government. Some of you who have been reading our print coverage were probably expecting to hear from Ben Wickler in this episode, but the Milwaukee News took precedence, so next week you can expect to hear from Ben Wickler about his quest to become the Democratic Party of Wisconsin chairman. We'll see you then.
Wedge Issues has been brought to you by wispolitics.com. There are plenty of benefits to becoming a member. You can go to wispolitics.com/membership to find out more.